This family saw a shelving bear cub outside the home. What they did put everyone in shock. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The moonlight cast long shadows across the frost-kissed ground surrounding the Marshall family cabin. Inside, Ethan and Jessica Marshall sat beside a crackling fire, watching their daughter Lily as she gazed out the frosted window. The 10-year-old's breath created small clouds on the glass as she traced patterns with her fingertip. "Dad, look," Lily suddenly gasped, her body tensing as she pressed closer to the window. "There's something moving out there." Ethan rose from his chair, the old wooden floorboards creaking beneath his feet. He joined his daughter by the window, squinting to see through the darkness. Jessica followed, wrapping her cardigan tighter around her shoulders against the chill that seemed to seep through the cabin walls. "Where, sweetie?" "I don't see anything," Ethan said, his voice low and cautious. Lily pointed toward the woodpile near the edge of the clearing. "There, by the logs, something small." As the clouds parted, revealing more moonlight, they all saw it. A tiny bear cub stumbling through the underbrush, its movements unsteady and weak. The cub collapsed near the woodpile, its small body shivering violently against the cold autumn night. "It's a baby bear," Jessica whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for Lily's shoulder. "It looks sick or hurt." Lily pressed her palms against the glass, her eyes wide with concern. "We have to help it, Mom. Look how it's shaking. I think it's really cold." Ethan shook his head, running a hand through his dark hair. "Lily, we can't go near that cub. Its mother has to be somewhere nearby. Mother bears are incredibly protective and dangerous." The cub let out a faint, desperate cry that somehow carried through the glass, causing Lily to flinch as if she'd been struck. The small bear tried to stand again but collapsed, its breathing labored and visible even from a distance. "It's dying, Dad," Lily said, tears welling in her eyes. "Can't we do something? Anything?" Jessica and Ethan exchanged worried glances. The risks were real. Approaching a wild bear cub could lead to disaster if the mother was nearby, but the sight of the struggling animal was becoming unbearable to watch. "Maybe we could call someone," Jessica suggested. "The Forest Service or Animal Control?" Ethan checked his phone. No service. The storm must have knocked out the cell tower again. He walked to the landline and picked it up, listening for a moment before setting it back down with a sigh. Phone lines are down too. Outside, the cub's shivering intensified. It let out another feeble cry, this one weaker than before. Lily turned to her parents, tears now streaming down her face. "Please," she begged, "we have to try." Jessica knelt before her daughter, wiping away her tears with gentle fingers. "Honey, your father's right. We don't know where the mother is. She could be watching us right now." "But what if she's not coming back?" Lily countered. "What if the cub is all alone?" The family fell silent as they watched the small bear struggle through the window. Its fur was matted, and even from a distance they could see its ribs faintly outlined beneath its coat. Something was wrong. This wasn't just a cub that had wandered too far from its mother. A distant howl echoed through the forest, causing them all to stiffen. Wolves. The situation had just become more urgent. "If we do nothing, that cub won't survive the night," Jessica said quietly, looking up at her husband. "Not with wolves in the area." Ethan ran his hand over his face, conflicted. "Even if we wanted to help, what could we do? We're not wildlife experts." Lily walked to her room and returned moments later with her favorite stuffed bear clutched against her chest. Her face was set with a determination that her parents rarely saw. "I'm going to help it," she announced, reaching for her coat hanging by the door. "With or without you." "Lily, no!" Jessica moved to block her daughter's path. "It's too dangerous." "Then come with me," Lily pleaded. "Please, Mom, Dad, we can be careful. But I can't just watch it die." Ethan looked at his wife, then back at his daughter. The compassion in Lily's eyes was impossible to resist. She had always been this way, unable to stand by when any living creature was suffering, whether it was a wounded bird or a stray cat. "Okay," he finally said, causing both Lily and Jessica to look at him in surprise. "But we do this carefully. Very carefully." Jessica nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. "What's the plan?" "I'll take the flashlight and keep watch for the mother bear," Ethan said, moving to the closet where they kept emergency supplies. "Jess, grab that old blanket, the thick one. Lily, there's some leftover fish from dinner. Get that from the fridge." As they gathered their supplies, the family moved with purposeful quiet. Ethan checked the back door, making sure it would remain unlocked in case they needed to retreat quickly. Jessica found the blanket and clutched it to her chest, her knuckles white with tension. "Remember," Ethan instructed as they prepared to step outside, "if I give the signal, we run straight back to the cabin. No questions, no hesitation. Understand?" Lily and Jessica nodded, their breath visible in the cold night air as Ethan slowly opened the door. The cub was exactly where they had seen it last, a small dark heap against the white snow. It barely moved as they approached, only a slight rise and fall of its chest indicating it was still alive. "Careful," Ethan whispered, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, scanning the tree line constantly. "Stay behind me." Jessica and Lily followed closely, their footsteps crunching in the frost-covered ground. The night seemed to hold its breath around them, the only sounds being the distant call of an owl and the soft whimper of the bear cub. As they drew closer, they could see just how small and frail the cub really was. Its eyes were dull with exhaustion, and its breathing was shallow and rapid. "Oh, the poor thing," Jessica murmured. Lily knelt in the snow a few feet from the cub, her mother's hand firmly on her shoulder to keep her from moving closer. The cub noticed them and let out a feeble growl, but it was too weak to move away. "It's okay, little one," Lily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're here to help you." Jessica unwrapped the fish from its container and placed it on the ground, pushing it toward the cub with a stick. The scent seemed to reach the small bear, who lifted its head slightly, nostrils flaring. "That's it," Lily encouraged. "You need to eat." Slowly, painfully, the cub dragged itself toward the food. It sniffed cautiously, then began to eat with desperate hunger, tearing small pieces and swallowing them almost without chewing. "It's starving," Jessica said quietly. Ethan continued to scan the darkness, his body tense. "Let's get the blanket around it while it's distracted." Jessica unfolded the blanket, and with Lily's help, they began to inch it toward the feeding cub. Just as they were about to drape it over the small bear, a low, rumbling growl echoed from the edge of the forest. Everyone froze. There, at the tree line, stood an enormous black bear, its eyes reflecting the beam of Ethan's flashlight. The mother had returned. "Don't move," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "Nobody make any sudden movements." Jessica's hand tightened on Lily's shoulder, pulling her daughter closer to her side. The mother bear lowered her massive head, nostrils flaring as she caught their scent. She let out another rumbling growl, this one louder and more threatening than the first. "Ethan," Jessica breathed, her voice trembling. "What do we do?" Ethan stood perfectly still, positioning himself between his family and the bear. His mind raced through everything he'd ever read about bear encounters. Make yourself look big. Don't run. Back away slowly. But all those rules seemed useless now, with his wife and daughter beside him and a vulnerable cub between them and safety. The mother bear took a step forward, her huge paws leaving deep imprints in the snow. Another step. She was testing them, assessing whether they were a threat to her young. Lily, despite her fear, couldn't tear her eyes away from the cub who continued eating, seemingly unaware of the deadly tension surrounding it. Without thinking, she began to hum softly, a lullaby her mother used to sing to her when she was frightened by thunderstorms. "Lily," Jessica whispered urgently, "be quiet." But something strange happened. The mother bear paused, her ears twitching at the gentle sound. The cub looked up too, its eyes meeting Lily's for a brief moment. "Keep doing that," Ethan said, surprised by the bear's reaction. "Keep humming, Lily." Lily continued the soft melody, her voice growing slightly stronger as she saw the massive bear hesitate. The cub, warmed by the food and seemingly comforted by the sound, curled its small body toward the blanket that Jessica had dropped. The mother bear tilted her head, her behavior defying everything Ethan knew about wild animals. She should have charged, should have been in a blind rage at finding humans so close to her cub. Instead, she seemed uncertain. That's when Ethan noticed something odd about the mother bear. In the beam of his flashlight, he could see a thin metal object protruding from her right shoulder, what looked like a tranquilizer dart. "Jess," he whispered, "look at her shoulder. She's been darted." Jessica squinted through the darkness. "You're right, but who would—" Before she could finish, the distant sound of an engine broke through the stillness of the night. Headlights cut through the trees from the road beyond their property. A vehicle was approaching. The mother bear's head swung toward the new disturbance, and she let out a warning huff. The cub, still weak but slightly revived by the food, attempted to stand. The bear's scared of the lights, Ethan realized aloud, and she's not fully aggressive. She must be partially sedated. The approaching vehicle turned into their long driveway, its headlights sweeping across the yard. In the improved visibility, they could see the mother bear more clearly. She was thin, much too thin for this time of year when bears should be at their heaviest before hibernation. "Something's wrong with both of them," Jessica said. "They should be preparing for winter, not wandering around half-starved." The cub had managed to crawl onto the blanket, seeming to seek its warmth. It looked toward its mother with what almost appeared to be apprehension rather than relief. The mother bear took another step toward them, then swayed slightly on her feet. The dart in her shoulder told a story. Someone had tried to capture or relocate her, and she had escaped before the sedative took full effect. The vehicle's engine grew louder as it neared the cabin. Suddenly, the mother bear made a decision. With surprising speed for her compromised state, she lunged forward, not toward the family but toward her cub. She nudged the small bear with her snout, urging it to move. The cub struggled to stand but couldn't manage more than a feeble attempt before collapsing again. The mother bear let out a sound that chilled them to the bone, not a growl of aggression, but a moan of distress. "She can't protect it," Lily said, her eyes wide with understanding. "She's trying to make it run away, but it can't." The approaching vehicle was now visible, a green truck with the emblem of the State Wildlife Service on its door. The headlights illuminated the entire scene, the family frozen in place, the mother bear standing protectively over her cub, both animals clearly in distress. The truck skidded to a halt, and a door slammed. A tall man in a uniform stepped out, holding what appeared to be a tranquilizer rifle. "Step away from the bears," he called out, his voice authoritative but controlled. "Move toward the cabin slowly." Ethan raised his hands. "We found the cub. It's sick or injured. The mother just arrived. She has a dart in her shoulder already." The wildlife officer kept his rifle trained on the mother bear, who was now trying to lift her cub by the scruff of its neck. Her movements were becoming increasingly uncoordinated as the sedative worked through her system. "That's Ranger Bennett," Jessica whispered, recognizing the man. "Jacob Bennett. He came to Lily's school for wilderness safety training last year." Ranger Bennett moved toward them carefully, keeping his eyes on the bears. "That mother's been darted once already tonight. She escaped during a relocation attempt. We've been tracking her for hours." "What's wrong with them?" Lily asked, her voice small but steady. "Why are they so thin?" Ranger Bennett's expression was grim. "There was a fire on the other side of the mountain last month. It destroyed their feeding grounds. We've been trying to relocate the affected bears before winter, but this mother has been particularly difficult to capture. And now I see why. She was looking for her cub." The mother bear was fighting the effects of the sedative, her massive body swaying as she stood guard over her offspring. She let out another mournful sound, nudging the cub, who responded with a weak whimper. "The cub won't make it if we don't help," Ranger Bennett said, reaching for a case in the back of his truck. "And the mother's going to be unconscious soon from that first dart. I need to get them both to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center." Ethan looked at his wife and daughter, then back at the bears. "How can we help?" Ranger Bennett seemed surprised by the offer, but didn't hesitate. "I need to examine the cub, but I can't get close until the mother's fully sedated. Can you keep a safe distance, but help me keep track of where they go if they move deeper into the woods?" Just then, the mother bear made a final, desperate attempt to protect her cub. She lunged toward her baby, grabbed it by the scruff, and with tremendous effort began to drag it toward the forest. "She's running!" Ranger Bennett exclaimed, raising his rifle. "Wait!" Lily cried out, stepping forward before her parents could stop her. "Don't shoot her!" The mother bear paused at the sound of Lily's voice, turning her head toward the girl. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as human and animal locked eyes across the snowy clearing. What happened next would become the talk of the entire community for years to come. The mother bear gently set her cub down, took 2 unsteady steps toward Lily, and collapsed in the snow, the sedative finally taking full effect. The cub crawled weakly toward its unconscious mother, curling against her side with a pitiful whimper. Ranger Bennett lowered his rifle slowly, his expression one of disbelief. "In 15 years working with wildlife, I've never seen anything like that. She wanted us to help them," Lily said with absolute certainty, tears streaming down her face. She knew she couldn't save her baby alone. Jessica pulled Lily back gently. "Sweetheart, I don't think—" "No, Mom," Lily insisted, her gaze fixed on the bears. She looked right at me. She knew. Ranger Bennett approached the unconscious mother bear cautiously, checking her vital signs before turning his attention to the cub. "This little one is severely malnourished and dehydrated," he confirmed after a brief examination. "And it looks like there might be an injury to its back leg, possibly from the fire or from predators." "Will they be okay?" Lily asked, her voice small but hopeful. Ranger Bennett didn't sugarcoat his answer. "The mother should recover fine once the dart wears off." "The cub ... He sighed. "It's in bad shape, but we have excellent veterinarians at the rehabilitation center. We'll do everything we can." He returned to his truck and pulled out a large transport cage along with a medical kit. "I could use some help getting them loaded safely. The mother is out cold, but she's still over 200 pounds. Ethan stepped forward without hesitation. Tell me what to do. As Ranger Bennett and Ethan prepared to move the mother bear, Jessica and Lily knelt beside the cub, wrapping it more securely in the blanket. The small bear didn't resist, its eyes half closed with exhaustion. You'll be all right, Lily whispered, gently stroking the cub's head through the blanket. You and your mom are going to get help now. Jessica watched her daughter with a mixture of fear and pride. Be careful, Lily. It's still a wild animal. I know, Lily said, but she continued her gentle ministrations. The cub made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and nuzzled weakly against her hand. Ranger Bennett returned with a smaller transport cage for the cub. That's unusual, he commented, observing the cub's behavior with Lily. It should be terrified of humans, especially at this age. Maybe it knows we're helping, Lily suggested. Ranger Bennett smiled kindly. Maybe it does. With great care, they loaded the cub into the smaller cage, and then, with considerable effort, managed to get the mother bear secured in the larger transport container. Throughout the process, Lily stayed close to the cub, talking to it softly, her fear completely replaced by concern. As Ranger Bennett prepared to leave, he turned to the family with a serious expression. What you did tonight was incredibly dangerous. You should never approach a bear cub in the wild. He paused, then added, but in this case, you probably saved its life. If you hadn't found it when you did, predators would have gotten to it before morning. Will you let us know if they're okay? Lily asked anxiously. Please. Ranger Bennett nodded. I will. And if the cub recovers enough, we might be able to arrange for you to visit the rehabilitation center. As the wildlife officer drove away with the bears safely secured in his truck, the Marshall family stood in the moonlight, the night suddenly quiet and empty around them. The adrenaline that had carried them through the encounter was fading, leaving them shaky and exhausted. I can't believe what just happened, Jessica breathed, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. Let's get inside. It's freezing out here. But Lily lingered, staring in the direction the truck had disappeared. Dad? Mom? Do you think they'll be all right? Ethan knelt beside his daughter, looking into her eyes. I don't know, sweetheart. But they have a much better chance now than they did before. I've never seen you so brave, Jessica added, smoothing Lily's hair. Or so reckless, she added with a weak smile. Lily turned toward the cabin but stopped when she noticed something in the snow where the cub had been lying. She bent down and picked it up, a small tuft of brown fur caught on a twig. Can I keep this? She asked. To remember? Jessica and Ethan exchanged a glance, then nodded. Lily carefully tucked the tuft of fur into her pocket, and the family finally retreated to the warmth and safety of their cabin. None of them slept much that night. Every time Lily closed her eyes, she saw the mother bear's gaze, intelligent, desperate, and somehow knowing. Jessica kept replaying the moment the bear collapsed, imagining all the horrible ways the encounter could have ended. Ethan found himself researching bear rehabilitation on his phone once the cell service returned, hungry for any information that might hint at the bear's chances for recovery. Morning brought an unexpected commotion. Word had somehow spread about their nighttime adventure, and by mid-morning, neighbors began arriving at their doorstep, eager for first-hand accounts of what had happened. Is it true you faced down a mother bear to save her cub? Asked Mrs. Dawson from 2 cabins over, her eyes wide with disbelief. Did you really sing to a wild bear? Mr. Hayes, the retired schoolteacher, asked Lily with a mixture of awe and skepticism. By noon, it seemed half the community had gathered in their living room, hanging on every word as the family recounted their experience. Some expressed horror at the risks they had taken, while others praised their compassion and courage. "You're lucky to be alive," Connor Adams, a local hunter, said solemnly. "Mother bears are the most dangerous animals in these woods." "It wasn't luck," Lily insisted, clutching the small tuft of fur in her pocket. "The bear wanted our help. She knew we weren't going to hurt her baby." Some of the adults exchanged skeptical glances, clearly attributing Lily's interpretation to a child's imagination, but others weren't so quick to dismiss her. "Animals know more than we give them credit for," said Savannah Reed, an elderly woman who had lived in the mountains her entire life. "Sometimes they can sense good intentions." The impromptu gathering was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Through the window, they could see Ranger Bennett's green truck pulling up to the cabin. The room fell silent as Ethan went to the door. Ranger Bennett looked surprised to find the house full of people. "Word travels fast in small towns," he said with a tired smile. "How are they?" Lily asked immediately, pushing her way to the front of the crowd. Ranger Bennett's expression softened. "The mother's doing fine. She woke up from the sedative and is currently in a secure enclosure at the rehabilitation center. She's undernourished, but otherwise healthy." "And the cub?" Jessica asked, noticing his hesitation. The ranger sighed. "The cub is in critical condition. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, and there's an infected wound on its back leg that's causing complications. The veterinarians are doing everything they can, but—" He trailed off, looking at Lily's eager face. "It's touch and go right now." Lily's expression fell. "Can we visit? Maybe if the cub sees us, sees me, it might help." The adults in the room gave each other knowing looks, the kind that children recognize as adults not taking them seriously. But Ranger Bennett didn't dismiss her. "Actually," he said thoughtfully, "there's something unusual I wanted to discuss with your parents." He glanced around at the crowded room. "Perhaps somewhere more private?" Jessica nodded, leading him to the kitchen while Ethan stayed with Lily in the living room, fielding more questions from their neighbors. In the kitchen, Ranger Bennett spoke in low tones. "The cub isn't responding well to treatment. It's refusing to eat, and its vital signs are weakening. Dr. Morgan, our wildlife veterinarian, noticed something strange, though. The cub seems to be responding to the blanket you wrapped it in." "Responding how?" Jessica asked. "It calms down when the blanket is nearby. Dr. Morgan thinks it might be associating the scent with safety." He hesitated. "This goes against all our protocols, but Dr. Morgan suggested that having your daughter visit might actually help. The cub formed some kind of bond with her during those few minutes of interaction." Jessica blinked in surprise. "You can't be serious. It's a wild animal." "I know how it sounds," Ranger Bennett admitted. "And normally we would never consider this. We want these bears to be rehabilitated and released back into the wild, which means minimal human contact. But in this case," he shrugged, "the cub might not survive without some intervention, and your daughter seems to have a way with it." Jessica leaned against the counter, processing this unexpected turn of events. "I'd have to discuss this with Ethan, of course." "Of course," Ranger Bennett agreed. "And if you do decide to come, it would be under strict supervision, with safety measures in place." When Jessica rejoined the others in the living room and quietly shared the ranger's suggestion with Ethan, she expected him to dismiss the idea immediately. Instead, he looked thoughtfully at Lily, who was animatedly describing to the neighbors how the mother bear had looked into her eyes. "Maybe there is something to what she's saying," Ethan murmured. "Either way, I think we need to at least try, for her sake as much as the cubs. And so, as their neighbors finally began to disperse, with promises to spread the word about the bear's condition, the Marshall family prepared for another unexpected chapter in their already extraordinary story. What they didn't realize was that their encounter with the bears was about to lead them down a path none of them could have anticipated, a path that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the boundary between humans and wild animals, and that would ultimately change not just their lives, but the lives of everyone in their small mountain community. "Pack an overnight bag," Ethan told Lily as Jessica spoke with Ranger Bennett about arrangements. "It looks like we're going to be visiting some bears." Lily's face lit up with hope. "I told you," she said with the absolute certainty that only a child could possess. "I told you she wanted us to help." As they prepared to leave, Jessica noticed Lily carefully placing the small tuft of bear fur into a tiny glass jar she'd found in the kitchen. "What are you doing with that?" Jessica asked. Lily secured the lid on the jar and tucked it into her backpack. "I'm bringing it for good luck," she replied, "and to remind the cub that we're connected now." Jessica wanted to explain that wild animals didn't think that way, that the connection Lily felt was one-sided, but something held her back. After what she had witnessed the night before, the way the mother bear had looked at her daughter, the way she had seemed to make a conscious choice to trust them with her cub, Jessica wasn't sure what to believe anymore. As they loaded into Ranger Bennett's truck for the hour-long drive to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, Jessica found herself hoping, against all logic and reason, that her daughter was right, that somehow, in that moonlit moment between human and bear, a bridge had been formed across the ancient divide that separated their worlds. What they would discover at the rehabilitation center would challenge the beliefs of everyone involved, from the skeptical wildlife experts to the marshals themselves, and it would all begin with a small brown bear cub fighting for its life, and a little girl who refused to give up on it. The drive to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center took them deep into the mountains, along winding roads that grew narrower and less maintained the farther they traveled. Lily sat by the window, her face pressed against the glass, watching the dense forest pass by in a blur of dark greens and browns. Her fingers kept returning to the small jar in her pocket, touching it like a talisman. "How much farther?" she asked, breaking a long silence. Ranger Bennett glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "About 20 more minutes. The center is pretty remote. We like to keep the animals away from too much human activity." "Have you worked with many bear cubs before?" Ethan asked from the front passenger seat. Bennett nodded. "A few dozen over the years. Usually orphaned cubs whose mothers were killed by poachers or hit by vehicles." He hesitated before adding, "It's rare to find a cub and mother both alive but in distress like this. This fire has disrupted their normal patterns severely." "How bad was the fire?" Jessica asked. "Almost 15,000 acres burned," Bennett replied grimly. "It started with a lightning strike but spread fast because of the drought. We've been finding displaced wildlife for weeks now." Lily tightened her grip on the jar in her pocket. "Will the forest grow back?" "Eventually," Bennett said. "Nature is resilient, but it takes time." As they rounded a bend, a sprawling facility came into view in a valley below. Unlike what the marshals had expected, perhaps a few basic buildings, the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was a sophisticated compound with multiple structures spread across several acres, all surrounded by high fencing. "Wow," Jessica breathed. "It's bigger than I imagined." "The Rocky Mountain Wildlife Recovery Center," Bennett said with evident pride. "One of the best facilities in the country. We rehabilitate everything from eagles to elk here." They drove through a security gate and parked outside a modern building with large windows. A slim woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun was waiting for them, clipboard in hand, her expression stern. "That's Dr. Lily Morgan," Bennett explained. "Our head veterinarian. I should warn you, she's not entirely on board with this visit. She believes in minimal human contact for rehabilitation cases." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Then why did she suggest we come?" "Because she's also practical," Bennett replied. "And right now she's desperate to save that cub." They exited the vehicle and Dr. Morgan approached, her eyes immediately focusing on young Lily. "So, you're the bear whisperer I've been hearing about," she said, her tone neutral but not unkind. "I'm Dr. Morgan." Lily stepped forward, extending her hand politely as she'd been taught. "I'm Lily Marshall. How's the cub doing?" Dr. Morgan seemed slightly taken aback by the girl's directness. "Not well, I'm afraid. That's why you're here." She shifted her attention to the adults. "I've prepared a brief orientation for you all. There are strict protocols we need to follow if this is going to work." They followed Dr. Morgan into the building, which smelled strongly of antiseptic. The walls were lined with photographs of successful rehabilitation cases. Wolves, mountain lions, eagles, and various other wildlife all eventually returned to their natural habitats. "Our goal at this facility," Dr. Morgan explained as they walked, "is always to return animals to the wild. We are not a zoo. We do not tame wild creatures or habituate them to human presence. Everything we do is designed to ensure they retain their natural behaviors and wariness of humans." She led them into a conference room and motioned for them to sit. "Which is why what we're attempting today goes against every principle I've established in 30 years of wildlife medicine." "Then why try it?" Jessica asked quietly. Dr. Morgan's professional demeanor slipped slightly, revealing the weight of concern beneath. "Because that cub has given up. Sometimes with very young animals that have experienced extreme trauma, they simply lose the will to live. They stop eating, stop responding to treatment. It's as if they've made a decision at some fundamental level." Lily's eyes widened. "But the cub can't die. It just can't." "I agree, Doctor," Morgan said, surprising them all. "Which is why I'm willing to try something unconventional." She turned to Ranger Bennett. "Jacob, would you bring in the blanket, please?" Bennett nodded and left the room, returning moments later with the blanket the marshals had used to wrap the cub the previous night. It had been folded carefully, preserving any scents it carried. "We placed this blanket in the cub's enclosure," Dr. Morgan explained. "The response was immediate. Heart rate decreased, stress behaviors diminished. The cub actually slept for almost 3 hours, which is the longest continuous rest we've observed since it arrived." She looked directly at Lily. "Something about your scent on this blanket calmed it. I can't explain it scientifically, but I can't ignore the evidence either." Lily glanced at her parents, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I told you the cub knew we were helping." Dr. Morgan held up a cautioning hand. "Don't misunderstand me. This doesn't mean the cub likes you or recognizes you as a friend. Wild animals don't form attachments to humans the way domesticated animals do. But there appears to be some kind of association that's reducing its stress. And right now, stress is our biggest enemy in its recovery." "What exactly do you want Lily to do?" Ethan asked, his protective instincts clearly on high alert. "First, simply sit near the cub's enclosure. No direct contact," Dr. Morgan specified. "We'll monitor the cub's vital signs and behavior. If we see improvement, we might, and I stress might, allow some closer interaction under strict supervision." "And the mother bear?" Jessica inquired. Dr. Morgan and Ranger Bennett exchanged a glance that didn't go unnoticed by the marshals. "What is it?" Ethan pressed. "Is something wrong with the mother, too?" Dr. Morgan sighed. "The mother is physically recovering well from the sedation and her ordeal, but she's extremely agitated. She can sense her cub is nearby but can't reach it, which is causing her significant distress. We're concerned about her injuring herself trying to break through the enclosure barriers." "Can't you put them together?" Lily asked, the solution seeming obvious to her. "Not in their current states," Dr. Morgan explained patiently. "The mother needs to regain her strength, and the cub requires intensive medical care. Additionally, if the cub doesn't start eating soon, it may need to be fed intravenously, which would be impossible with the mother present." Bennett cleared his throat. "There's something else you should know. The mother's behavior is unusual. Bears typically aren't as bonded to their young as, say, primates or elephants. They're protective, yes, but not in the deeply emotional way this mother seems to be." "What do you mean?" Jessica asked. "She's refusing food," Bennett explained. "She won't calm down or rest. She keeps making these vocalizations that, frankly, I've never heard from a bear before. It's almost like she's calling to the cub." Lily stood up suddenly. "She's worried about her baby, just like human mothers worry. Why is that so hard to believe?" The adults fell silent, taken aback by the girl's vehemence. Dr. Morgan finally spoke, her voice softer than before. "You might be right, Lily. We scientists sometimes get so caught up in what the textbooks tell us that we forget animals are individuals, with behaviors that don't always match what we expect." She stood, straightening her lab coat. "If you're ready, I'd like to take you to see the cub now. Remember the rules: quiet voices, slow movements, and follow my instructions exactly." As they walked through a series of secure doorways, each requiring Dr. Morgan's keycard, Lily could barely contain her anticipation. They entered a climate-controlled building with several separate enclosures, most empty at the moment. "This is our intensive care unit," Dr. Morgan explained. "Currently, our little bear is the only patient." She led them to a window overlooking a small room with soft flooring and a padded enclosure in the center. Inside, barely visible within a nest of blankets, lay the tiny bear cub. It looked even smaller and more fragile under the bright lights, its breathing shallow and rapid. Lily pressed her hands against the glass. "It looks worse than before," she whispered. "It hasn't eaten since you found it," Dr. Morgan confirmed. "We've been providing fluids intravenously, but that's not sustainable. Bears need to build fat reserves, especially before winter." A door to the side led into an observation area that adjoined the cub's room. Dr. Morgan gestured for Lily to enter first, followed by her parents. "Sit here," she instructed, pointing to a chair positioned about 6 feet from the enclosure. "Speak softly if you want to talk to it. I'll be monitoring its vital signs from the control room." Lily sat down carefully, her gaze never leaving the small brown heap of fur. "Can I sing to it like I did last night?" Dr. Morgan nodded. "That's a good idea. It might respond to the same stimulus that initially formed the association." As the doctor left the room, Ethan and Jessica hung back, standing near the wall to give Lily space. The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment attached to the cub. Lily cleared her throat nervously, then began to hum the same lullaby from the previous night. Her voice was quiet at first, uncertain in the clinical setting, but grew stronger as she focused on the small creature before her. For several minutes, nothing happened. The cub remained motionless except for the rise and fall of its chest. Lily continued singing, undeterred, occasionally glancing at her parents for reassurance. Then, almost imperceptibly, the cub's ear twitched. Its nose moved slightly, sampling the air. With what appeared to be enormous effort, it lifted its head just enough to look in Lily's direction. Through the observation window, they could see Dr. Morgan leaning forward, her attention focused on the monitors. She made a small gesture that seemed to indicate encouragement. "Keep going," Jessica whispered to her daughter. "I think it's working." Lily nodded and continued her song, now adding words, a simple lullaby about moonlight and safety and dreams. The cub's eyes, previously half closed and dull, seemed to focus on her. Its nose twitched more actively. Suddenly, from elsewhere in the facility, a deep, resonant sound echoed through the walls, a moan that rose and fell in an eerie pattern. The mother bear, somehow sensing the interaction, was calling out. The effect on the cub was immediate and dramatic. It raised its head fully, ears perked forward, and let out a small, answering cry. Dr. Morgan rushed into the room, her professional composure momentarily forgotten. "It's responding. For the first time since arrival, it's showing alertness." "It heard its mother," Lily said simply. "That's impossible," Dr. Morgan replied automatically. "The ICU is soundproofed, and they're in completely separate buildings." But as the mother bear's call came again, followed by another response from the cub, Dr. Morgan's scientific certainty seemed to waver. "This is unprecedented." Ranger Bennett appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. "Dr. Morgan, the mother is becoming increasingly agitated. She's throwing herself against the enclosure walls. I'm concerned she might injure herself." Dr. Morgan bit her lip, clearly torn between established protocol and the unfolding situation. "The last thing we need is 2 critical patients instead of 1. "Let them be together," Lily said suddenly. "They need each other." "It's not that simple," Dr. Morgan began, but Lily cut her off. "Yes, it is," the girl insisted. "You're making it complicated because that's what grown-ups do. But it's really simple. They're family. They belong together." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room as the adults exchanged glances. The cub had managed to pull itself to its feet, unsteady but determined, its small cries growing more insistent as it responded to its mother. Dr. Morgan's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of a difficult decision evident in her posture. Ranger Bennett prepared transport for the cub. "We'll attempt a controlled reunion." Bennett's eyebrows shot up. "Are you sure that's wise?" "No," Dr. Morgan admitted, "but I'm less sure that keeping them separated is the right approach, given what we're witnessing." As Bennett left to make preparations, Dr. Morgan turned to the marshals. "This goes against every rehabilitation protocol we have. If the mother rejects the cub or becomes aggressive due to her stress, we could lose both of them." "What makes you think she'd reject her own cub?" Jessica asked. "It happens in nature more often than people realize," Dr. Morgan explained. "Particularly when resources are scarce, as they are after the fire, and the cub's weakened state might trigger instincts we don't fully understand." Ethan placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "What do you think, Lily? You seem to have a connection with these bears." Lily didn't hesitate. The mother bear wasn't trying to save herself last night. She was trying to save her baby. She won't hurt it now. Dr. Morgan studied the girl thoughtfully. "Your confidence is remarkable. I hope it's justified." She checked the monitors one last time. The cub's vitals are stronger than they've been since arrival. The stimulation of hearing its mother seems to have triggered an awakening of sorts. Before they could discuss further, Bennett returned with a small transport carrier and 2 assistants. "Everything's ready. The mother has been moved to the secure outdoor enclosure, and we've set up barriers for observation and emergency intervention if needed." The process of moving the cub was delicate. Dr. Morgan insisted on checking its IV site and administering a quick injection of nutrients before allowing it to be placed in the carrier. "This is a calculated risk," she told the marshals, as the cub was secured for transport. "I want to be clear about that, but sometimes in wildlife medicine we have to trust instinct alongside science." They followed the medical team through the facility to a large outdoor area enclosed by high fencing. Within this perimeter was a smaller, more secure enclosure where the mother bear paced anxiously, her massive form a stark reminder of the power and potential danger she represented. Observation platforms allowed them to view the enclosure from above, at what Dr. Morgan assured them was a safe distance. The marshals, along with Ranger Bennett and several staff members, positioned themselves to watch the reunion. "We'll lower the cub's carrier into the enclosure using that mechanical arm," Dr. Morgan explained, pointing to a device that resembled a small crane. "Once the carrier is stable on the ground, we'll open it remotely. This keeps our people safely outside the enclosure." The mother bear seemed to sense what was happening. She stopped pacing and focused intently on the mechanical arm as it extended over the enclosure, the carrier containing her cub suspended beneath it. "She knows," Lily whispered. "Look at how still she is now." It was true. The massive bear had gone from frantic movement to complete stillness, her eyes fixed on the approaching carrier. Only the occasional twitching of her ears indicated her intense focus. With painstaking slowness, the carrier was lowered to the ground. The mother bear approached cautiously, sniffing the air, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Remarkable restraint," Bennett murmured. "She's being careful not to appear threatening." Once the carrier was safely on the ground, Dr. Morgan activated the remote release. The door swung open, but for several tense moments nothing happened. The cub didn't emerge. "It might be too weak to move," Dr. Morgan said, concern evident in her voice. "We might need to intervene after all." But Lily shook her head. "It's scared. It needs encouragement." As if hearing the girl's words, the mother bear approached the carrier and made a soft grunting sound, a gentle call that carried clearly to the observers above. Almost immediately, the cub's small face appeared at the carrier opening. What followed brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching, even the most seasoned wildlife professionals. The cub wobbled out of the carrier on unsteady legs, and the mother bear lowered her massive head, gently touching her nose to her babies. She made a series of soft sounds unlike anything the humans had heard before. Not growls or grunts, but something almost like purring. The cub pressed against its mother's leg, and she curled her body protectively around it, creating a living shelter of fur and warmth. The contrast between their sizes was striking. The mother so powerful, the cub so fragile. Yet the tenderness between them was unmistakable. "I've never—" Dr. Morgan's voice trailed off, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten. "This level of demonstrative bonding is extraordinarily rare to observe in bears." Lily smiled, a tear sliding down her cheek. "They love each other. Why is that so hard for grown-ups to believe?" Dr. Morgan didn't answer, her attention fixed on the bears below. The mother was now carefully grooming her cub, cleaning its fur with gentle swipes of her tongue. The cub had visibly relaxed, its earlier distress replaced by what could only be described as contentment. "The real test will be if the cub eats," Bennett said quietly. "We've placed food in the enclosure. If the mother can encourage it to eat—" They didn't have to wait long. After several minutes of reunion, the mother bear gently nudged her cub toward a shallow dish containing a nutritious mixture prepared by the center's staff. At first, the cub showed little interest, but with persistent encouragement from its mother, nudges and soft vocalizations, it finally began to eat. A collective sigh of relief passed through the observation platform. Dr. Morgan's shoulders visibly relaxed. "That's the first hurdle cleared," she said. If it continues to eat and respond to treatment, its chances improve significantly. As they watched the bears below, the mother, now settled in a protective curl around her feeding cub, Ranger Bennett stepped closer to the marshals. "There's something I haven't mentioned," he said in a low voice. "Something that makes this case particularly special." "What is it?" Ethan asked. Bennett glanced at Dr. Morgan, who nodded her permission. "That mother bear is known to us," he explained. "She has a tracking tag. You probably couldn't see it under her fur. She was tagged 3 years ago as part of a research study." "And?" Jessica prompted when he paused. "And she's exhibited unusual behavior before," Bennett continued. "During the study, researchers noted that she displayed unexpected problem-solving abilities and atypical social behaviors with her previous cubs." "Previous cubs?" Lily perked up. "You mean she's had babies before?" Bennett nodded. "2 previous litters, and she was an exceptionally attentive mother both times. The researchers actually gave her a name instead of just a number, which almost never happens in wildlife studies." "What's her name?" Lily asked eagerly. "Aurora," Bennett replied, "named for the northern lights that were visible the night she was first tagged." Lily's face lit up. "Aurora," she repeated softly. "It's beautiful." "And what about the cub?" Ethan asked. "Does it have a designation?" Dr. Morgan joined the conversation. "Not officially. We typically avoid naming rehabilitation animals to prevent attachment, but given the unusual circumstances—" She looked at Lily. "Perhaps you'd like to suggest something?" "Unofficially, of course." The offer clearly delighted Lily. She thought for a moment, watching the small bear who was now finishing its meal under the watchful eye of its mother. "Nova," she finally said, "because it's a bright new star." Dr. Morgan smiled, the first genuine smile they'd seen from her. "Nova it is, unofficially." As they continued to observe the bears, Dr. Morgan explained the next steps in their recovery process. "We'll keep them in this protected enclosure until both are strong enough for release. The cub, Nova, will need regular medical checks, and we'll need to ensure Aurora is regaining proper weight." "And then, what happens?" Jessica asked. "Where will they go when they're well?" A shadow crossed Dr. Morgan's face. "That's complicated. Their original territory was destroyed in the fire. It will be years before it can properly support bears again." "So, where will you release them?" Ethan pressed. Dr. Morgan and Ranger Bennett exchanged another of those meaningful glances that suggested there was more to the story. "We're still determining the best location," Bennett said carefully. "It needs to be far enough from human settlements to minimize conflict, but rich enough in resources to support them." Lily, perceptive beyond her years, caught the adult's hesitation. "You don't know where to put them, do you?" Dr. Morgan sighed. "It's not that simple, Lily. The fire displaced many animals, not just Aurora and Nova. All suitable territories nearby are already occupied by other bears. Introducing new bears could lead to conflict, injury, or worse." "What's the alternative?" Jessica asked, concern evident in her voice. "Normally, in cases where rehabilitation and release isn't possible, animals remain in captivity," Bennett explained reluctantly. "Educational facilities, sanctuaries, zoos." "No!" Lily exclaimed, her voice echoing around the observation platform. Below, Aurora's head lifted sharply at the sound, her keen ears detecting the girl's distress. "You can't put them in a zoo. They belong in the forest." Ethan placed a calming hand on his daughter's shoulder. "I'm sure Dr. Morgan and Ranger Bennett will do everything possible to find them a suitable wild habitat," he said, looking pointedly at the professionals. Dr. Morgan nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "Of course, that's always our priority. But I want to be honest with you. Finding the right release location will be challenging." As they continued discussing the bear's future, Lily's attention was drawn back to the enclosure below. Aurora had risen to her feet and was looking directly up at the observation platform. Directly at Lily, it seemed. The massive bear's gaze was steady, unblinking, with an intensity that sent a shiver down the girl's spine. "She's looking at me," Lily whispered, interrupting the adults' conversation. They all turned to look. Sure enough, Aurora stood perfectly still, her focus unwavering as she stared at Lily's position on the platform. "That's unusual," Bennett said quietly. "She shouldn't be able to distinguish individuals at this distance." But it was undeniable. When Lily stepped slightly to the side, Aurora's gaze followed her. The connection between girl and bear, impossible according to everything the wildlife experts knew, was evidently real. "What does it mean?" Jessica asked, instinctively moving closer to her daughter. Dr. Morgan shook her head, scientific certainty giving way to wonder. "I don't know. In 30 years of wildlife medicine, I've never seen anything quite like this." What none of them realized in that moment was that the unusual bond they were witnessing was about to lead them into uncharted territory, a journey that would challenge scientific understanding, transform their small community, and forge an unprecedented connection between humans and the wild. As they left the rehabilitation center that evening, with promises to return the following day to check on the bear's progress, the Marshall family couldn't have known that their simple act of compassion on a cold night was about to spark a chain of events that would eventually be recounted in scientific journals, nature documentaries, and local legend. Aurora and Nova, the bear mother and cub whose lives they had saved, would become catalysts for change in ways no one could have predicted. And young Lily Marshall, the girl who sang to bears, was about to discover that her connection to these wild creatures ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. The drive home was filled with excited conversation as Lily recounted every detail of the bears' reunion to her parents. Her earlier fears for Nova's survival replaced by bubbling optimism. "Did you see how gentle Aurora was?" she asked for perhaps the 5th time. "And how she knew exactly what Nova needed?" Jessica smiled, reaching back to squeeze her daughter's knee. "It was remarkable, sweetie. You were right about them." Ethan, driving through the darkening mountain roads, glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "Doctor?" "Morgan seemed impressed by your insight about the bears. Have you always been this interested in wildlife?" Lily shrugged. "I guess so. Animals make more sense than people sometimes. They don't pretend." The simple observation gave Jessica pause. She turned to look at her daughter more closely. "What do you mean by that?" "People say things they don't mean all the time," Lily explained, with the straightforward logic of a child. "They smile when they're not happy, or say they're fine when they're sad. Animals don't do that. They just are what they are." Ethan and Jessica exchanged a glance, one of those silent communications that parents develop over years of raising a child together. There had always been something different about Lily, a sensitivity, an awareness that sometimes seemed beyond her years. Her connection with the bears suddenly seemed less surprising in that context. As they turned onto the rural road leading to their cabin, Ethan slowed the car. "That's strange," he murmured. "What is it?" Jessica asked, following his gaze. Parked in front of their cabin was a sleek black SUV with the tinted windows. As they pulled up, a man in a crisp suit emerged from the vehicle, his expression professionally neutral as he awaited their arrival. "Stay in the car," Ethan instructed as he parked and stepped out to meet the stranger. Jessica and Lily watched through the windows as Ethan spoke with the man, their conversation too distant to overhear. After a few minutes, Ethan returned to the car, his expression troubled. "Who is it?" Jessica asked quietly. "His name is Michael Hayes," Ethan replied. "He says he's from the Department of Environmental Conservation. He wants to talk to us about the bears." "Why would the DEC send someone to our home?" Jessica wondered aloud. Ethan shook his head slightly. "Apparently, our bear encounter has attracted some attention. Hayes says it's just a routine follow-up, but—" "But what?" Jessica pressed. "I don't know. Something feels off." Ethan looked at Lily in the back seat. "Lily, when we go inside, I want you to go straight to your room, okay? Mom and I need to talk to Mr. Hayes alone." Lily frowned. "But it's about the bears. I want to hear." "Lily," Jessica said firmly, "listen to your father. We'll tell you everything important afterward." Reluctantly, Lily agreed. The family exited the car and approached the cabin, where Michael Hayes waited with a thin briefcase tucked under his arm. "Thank you for your time," Hayes said smoothly as they reached the porch. "I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but this matter has some urgency." Inside the cabin, true to her promise, Lily headed to her room after a suspicious glance at the visitor. Once her door closed, Hayes settled into an armchair and opened his briefcase. "Mr. and Mrs. Marshall," he began, his tone professionally cordial but lacking warmth. "I understand you had a rather unusual encounter with a bear and her cub last night." "News travels fast," Ethan commented. Hayes smiled thinly. "When it comes to matters of public safety and wildlife management, yes, it does." He removed a folder from his briefcase. "I've reviewed Ranger Bennett's report, as well as the preliminary assessment from Dr. Morgan at the Rehabilitation Center." "Is there a problem?" Jessica asked directly. Hayes paused, choosing his words carefully. "Not a problem, exactly. More of a special situation. The bears you encountered, particularly the mother, have become subjects of interest to several agencies." "What kind of interest?" Ethan asked, his protective instincts clearly on alert. "Research interest," Hayes clarified. "The mother bear, Aurora, as the research team named her, has exhibited behaviors that some scientists find noteworthy. Her problem-solving abilities, her unusual level of parental care, her interactions with humans. She's special," Jessica agreed cautiously. "But I'm still not clear on why that brings you to our home tonight." Hayes leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Marshall, your family has now become part of this bear's documented history. Your daughter, in particular, seems to have formed some kind of connection with these animals." "Lily has always had a way with animals," Ethan said defensively. "It's nothing unusual." "On the contrary," Hayes countered. "What happened at the Rehabilitation Center today was highly unusual. Dr. Morgan's report indicates that your daughter facilitated a breakthrough in the cub's treatment, a breakthrough that conventional methods had failed to achieve." Jessica and Ethan remained silent, waiting for Hayes to get to the point. "I represent a joint task force," Hayes finally explained. "The DEC, in cooperation with the University Research Department and several wildlife conservation organizations, has been monitoring Aurora for some time. The fire disrupted our observation program, and we lost track of her until your encounter." "I still don't understand what this has to do with us," Ethan pressed. Hayes closed his folder. "We would like to interview your daughter about her interactions with the bears. Additionally, we'd like her to participate in Aurora and Nova's rehabilitation process on a more regular basis." Jessica's protective instincts flared immediately. "Absolutely not. Lily is 10 years old. She's not a research subject." Mrs. Marshall, Hayes said soothingly, we're not suggesting anything inappropriate. Simply supervised visits similar to today's. Dr. Morgan believes your daughter's presence may significantly improve the cub's chances of recovery. And what happens after the bears recover? Ethan asked sharply. Dr. Morgan mentioned there are challenges finding a suitable release location. A flicker of something, discomfort perhaps, crossed Hayes's otherwise composed face. That's one of the matters being evaluated. Given Aurora's unique behavioral patterns, there are some who believe she and her cub might be more valuable in a controlled research environment. Jessica stood abruptly. You mean captivity? You want to keep them in captivity? It would be a specialized facility, Hayes clarified quickly, with extensive natural habitat simulation. Hardly a conventional zoo environment. But not freedom, Ethan stated flatly. Hayes sighed. Mr. Marshall, I understand your concern, truly, but these bears present a unique opportunity to study advanced cognitive and social behaviors in ursids. The scientific value is— They're not lab specimens, Jessica interrupted. They're wild animals who deserve to be in the wild. Hayes closed his briefcase with a decisive click. I see we have different perspectives on this matter. Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time when emotions aren't running quite so high. He stood and handed Ethan a business card. Please consider what I've said. Your daughter's participation could make a significant difference, both for these bears and for our understanding of bear behavior more broadly. As Hayes prepared to leave, a small sound from the hallway caught their attention. Lily stood in the doorway, her expression making it clear she'd heard at least part of the conversation. You want to put Aurora and Nova in a cage, she said, her voice small but steady. Forever. Hayes turned, his professional mask slipping slightly in the face of the child's direct accusation. Not a cage, young lady. A research habitat where they would be well cared for and protected. But not free, Lily countered, echoing her father's words. They wouldn't be able to go where they want or do what bears are supposed to do. Lily, Jessica began, you were supposed to stay in your room. But Lily's attention remained fixed on Hayes. I won't help you lock them up, she stated firmly. Aurora saved her baby. She trusted us to help them. I won't trick them. Hayes regarded the girl with unexpected respect. You care deeply about these bears. That's admirable. But sometimes what we want for those we care about isn't what's best for them, or safest. Safe isn't always best, Lily replied with surprising wisdom. Sometimes being free is more important than being safe. A silence fell over the room as the adults absorbed the child's words. Even Hayes seemed momentarily at a loss for a response. Finally, he nodded slightly. You've given me something to think about, Miss Marshall. He turned back to her parents. I'll be in touch. Please consider my proposal. There may be a compromise that serves everyone's interests, including the bears. After Hayes departed, the family sat together in the living room, the weight of the unexpected visit settling around them. I don't trust him, Lily declared immediately. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I'm not sure I do either, sweetheart. Jessica leaned forward, taking her daughter's hands in hers. Lily, I need you to be honest with us. What happened today at the center? That connection you seem to have with the bears. Has anything like that ever happened before? With other animals, I mean? Lily hesitated, glancing down at her lap before meeting her mother's eyes. Kind of. Sometimes I just understand what animals are feeling, like they're talking to me but not with words. Ethan and Jessica exchanged another of their parental glances. And today, with Aurora, Ethan prompted gently. What did you feel from her? Lily's expression grew distant, thoughtful. She was scared at first. Not of us, but for Nova. She thought she might lose him forever. The girl's eyes refocused on her parents. But when she looked at me today, at the center, she recognized me. Not just as a person, but as the one who helped her baby. Jessica and Ethan didn't know quite what to make of their daughter's claim. The scientific part of their mind said it was impossible, that Lily was anthropomorphizing, attributing human emotions and recognition to an animal incapable of such complexity. But they had seen Aurora's gaze lock onto Lily with undeniable focus. They had witnessed the bear's unusual behavior firsthand. "What do you think we should do?" Jessica asked her daughter, recognizing that Lily deserved a voice in this decision. "We have to help them get back to the wild," Lily said immediately. "Not some fake wild place with scientists watching them all the time. Real wild." Ethan sighed. "That might not be as simple as it sounds, sweetheart. From what Dr. Morgan and Ranger Bennett said, there's no suitable territory nearby." A determined expression settled on Lily's face, one her parents recognized from previous battles over bedtimes and vegetables. "Then we'll find one. There has to be somewhere they can go." Later that night, after Lily had finally gone to bed, Jessica and Ethan sat by the fireplace, speaking in low tones. "What do you make of all this?" Jessica asked, cradling a mug of tea between her palms. Ethan shook his head. "I don't know. The rational part of me says Lily is just a compassionate kid projecting her feelings onto these bears. But then you see her with them, and it's hard to deny there's something unusual happening," Jessica finished for him. "Exactly." Ethan leaned back, staring into the fire. "And this Hayes character. I don't like how interested they are in Lily's connection with the bears. It feels like they want to study her as much as Aurora." Jessica's expression hardened. "That's not happening. Whatever we decide about helping with the bears' rehabilitation, Lily is not becoming a research subject." "Agreed," Ethan said firmly. "But we still need to decide how involved we're going to be with this situation. It's clearly going to be complicated." Jessica was quiet for a moment, her thoughts drifting back to the moment they had found the cub, to the way Aurora had looked at them in the forest, to the reunion they had witnessed at the rehabilitation center. "I think we're already involved," she said finally. "The question is how we handle it from here." The next morning, they were surprised by an early phone call from Ranger Bennett. "I hope I didn't wake you," he apologized. "But I thought you should know that Hayes paid me a visit after he left your place yesterday." "What did he want?" Ethan asked, immediately alert. "To emphasize the air search priorities of the situation," Bennett replied, his tone making it clear what he thought of those priorities. "I got the impression he was trying to ensure I wouldn't interfere with whatever plans they have for Aurora and Nova. What are your thoughts on the situation?" Jessica asked, having joined Ethan by the phone. Bennett was quiet for a moment. "Officially, I'm required to cooperate with the Department of Environmental Conservation. Unofficially, I've been watching Aurora for 3 years. She deserves better than life as a research specimen." Relief washed over Jessica's face. "That's what we think too. I might have an alternative," Bennett said cautiously. "But it would require some creative interpretation of regulations, and I'd need your help." "We're listening," Ethan replied. Bennett explained his idea, a bold, somewhat unorthodox plan that would require cooperation from the marshals, Dr. Morgan, and several others. By the time he finished outlining the details, both Jessica and Ethan were nodding with growing enthusiasm. "It could work," Ethan said thoughtfully. "But what about Hayes and his department?" "Leave that to Doctor Morgan and me," Bennett assured them. Just bring Lily to the center today, and don't mention this conversation to anyone else." The rehabilitation center was buzzing with activity when they arrived later that morning. Dr. Morgan met them at the entrance, her typical stern demeanor softened by what appeared to be cautious optimism. "Nova ate twice more after you left yesterday," she informed them, "and his blood work shows improvement. Aurora has also begun eating regularly." She looked directly at Lily. "Your visit seems to have triggered a positive response in both of them." Lily beamed. "Can I see them again today?" "That's why you're here, Doctor." Morgan confirmed. "But there's been a change of plans. We're moving them to a more naturalistic enclosure, one that will help prepare them for eventual release." The emphasis she placed on the word release wasn't lost on the marshals. It seemed Doctor Morgan had firmly chosen a side in the debate about the bear's future. The new enclosure was located in a remote corner of the facility's property, backed against the national forest itself. Unlike the previous sterile, medical setting, this space contained trees, a small stream, and natural features that mimicked a wild bear habitat. This transition enclosure allows the animals to practice natural behaviors while still receiving medical care, Dr. Morgan explained as they walked. Aurora and Nova were moved early this morning. They're adapting well to the new space. As they approached the viewing area, a simple platform partially concealed by vegetation, they could see Aurora exploring the enclosure, her movements much stronger and more fluid than the day before. Nova followed behind her, still somewhat unsteady but visibly improved. "His color's better, Doctor," Morgan observed. "And notice how he's weight-bearing on the injured leg now. That's significant progress." Lily stepped to the edge of the platform, her eyes fixed on the bears below. Almost immediately, Aurora paused in her exploration, her head lifting as she seemed to catch the girl's scent. Once again, the massive bear looked directly up at Lily, an acknowledgement that defied explanation. "Hello again," Lily whispered. Dr. Morgan watched this interaction with scientific curiosity. "Would you like to speak to them?" she asked Lily. "There's a voice channel that carries sound into the enclosure. We normally use it for minimal communication during feeding times." Lily nodded eagerly, and Dr. Morgan led her to a small panel with a microphone. "Just press this button while you speak." Taking a deep breath, Lily pressed the button. "Hi, Aurora. Hi, Nova. It's me, Lily. I'm glad you're feeling better." The effect was immediate and remarkable. Both bears stopped moving, their attention completely captured by the sound of Lily's voice. Aurora made a soft huffing sound, while Nova let out a small whine that sounded almost like a greeting. "They remember your voice," Dr. Morgan said quietly. "Remarkable." Over the next few hours, the marshals observed the bear's behavior, while Dr. Morgan performed various assessments and treatments. Nova allowed veterinary staff to examine his injured leg with minimal stress when Lily spoke to him during the procedure. Aurora, while still protective, showed none of the aggression typical of mother bears when humans approached her cub. As the day progressed, Ranger Bennett arrived, accompanied by two colleagues he introduced as wildlife biologists specializing in bear rehabilitation. Together with Dr. Morgan, they engaged in lengthy, sometimes heated discussions while reviewing Aurora and Nova's medical records and behavioral assessments. "What's happening?" Lily asked her parents as they waited on the observation platform during one such discussion. "I think," Ethan said carefully, "they're deciding what happens next for Aurora and Nova." By late afternoon, Dr. Morgan and Ranger Bennett approached the marshals, their expression suggesting they had reached some kind of resolution. "We'd like to speak with all of you, Doctor," Morgan said, "in private." They followed her to her office, where Bennett and the two biologists were waiting. Maps and satellite images were spread across the conference table, along with numerous documents bearing official seals. "We've made a decision regarding Aurora and Nova," Dr. Morgan announced once they were all seated. "Based on their remarkable recovery and the unique circumstances of their case, we're recommending an expedited rehabilitation and release protocol." Jessica and Ethan exchanged hopeful glances. "What does that mean?" Lily asked. Ranger Bennett stepped forward, pointing to one of the maps. "It means we've identified a potential release site. It's remote, with excellent natural resources, minimal human presence, and, most importantly, no established bear population that might threaten Aurora and Nova." "Where is it?" Ethan asked, studying the map. "The northern wilderness area," Bennett replied. "About 100 miles from here, deep in protected forest land. It's outside our usual release zone, which means we had to obtain special permissions." One of the biologists, a woman with silver-streaked dark hair, added, "We've been monitoring the area since the fire. The ecosystem there is intact, with abundant food sources appropriate for bears. The territory is large enough to support them comfortably." "When would they be released?" Jessica asked. Dr. Morgan exchanged a glance with Bennett before answering. "That's where things get complicated. Mr. Hayes and his department are pushing for Aurora to be transferred to their research facility as soon as Nova is sufficiently recovered." "But you just said," Ethan began. "We said we're recommending release, Doctor." Morgan interrupted. "Hayes's department has considerable authority in these matters. They could potentially overrule our recommendation." "Unless," Bennett added, "the bears are already gone when the transfer orders arrive." A silence fell over the room as the implication of his words sank in. "You want to release them early," Jessica realized, "before Hayes can stop it." The second biologist, a younger man with wire-rimmed glasses, nodded. "The paperwork for their transfer to the research facility is being processed. We estimate it will be finalized within 72 hours. Aurora is physically ready for release now," Dr. Morgan explained. "Nova is borderline, but with his mother's care and the abundant resources at the release site, his prognosis is good. Better, in our professional opinion, than the alternative of permanent captivity." "This is highly unorthodox," Bennett admitted, "and potentially risky for our careers. But we all agree it's the right thing to do for these bears." Ethan frowned thoughtfully. "Why are you telling us this? It seems like the less we know about any rule bending, the better." Dr. Morgan looked directly at Lily. "Because we need your help. The transition to the release enclosure is going well, but moving them to the transport vehicle for release could be stressful. We believe your presence would help keep the bears calm during the process." "When would this happen?" Jessica asked. "Tomorrow night," Bennett replied. "After the facility closes. We've arranged for a small team of trusted staff to assist." "And you want Lily there?" Ethan clarified, his protective instincts clearly engaged. "Only in a strictly supervised capacity," Dr. Morgan assured him. "She would remain at a safe distance at all times." Lily looked at her parents with pleading eyes. "Please, Mom, Dad, I want to help them." Jessica and Ethan had a silent conversation through glances and subtle expressions, the kind of wordless communication that develops between couples over years of partnership. "If we agree to this," Ethan finally said, "I want your absolute assurance that Lily's safety is the top priority. If anything seems even remotely dangerous, she's out of there immediately." "Agreed," Dr. Morgan said firmly. "We've designed the procedure with multiple safety protocols." And so, the plan was set. The marshals would return the following evening under the pretense of a final observation visit. Meanwhile, Dr. Morgan, Ranger Bennett, and their trusted team would prepare Aurora and Nova for transport and release. As they drove home that afternoon, the gravity of what they had agreed to weighed heavily on Jessica and Ethan. They were essentially helping to circumvent a government department's authority, something neither of them would normally consider. "Are we doing the right thing?" Jessica asked quietly while Lily dozed in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional day. Ethan kept his eyes on the winding mountain road. "I've been asking myself the same question, but when I think about those bears spending their lives in some research facility," he shook his head, "it just feels wrong." Hayes made it sound like a paradise, Jessica remembered, a specialized facility with extensive natural habitat simulation. "Still a cage," Ethan pointed out, "no matter how they dress it up." When they arrived home, they found another unexpected visitor waiting. Not Hayes this time, but Savannah Reed, the elderly woman who had spoken at their impromptu gathering the previous day. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," she said as they invited her inside, "but I wanted to speak with Lily about the bears." Lily, who had perked up at the sight of Miss Reed, smiled warmly. "Do you want to know how they're doing? They're much better today." "I'm glad to hear it," Savannah said, settling into an armchair by the fire. "But that's not why I'm here. I came because of what you said yesterday, about the mother bear knowing you were trying to help." Ethan and Jessica exchanged concerned glances, suddenly wary of where this conversation might be heading. Savannah noticed their apprehension and smiled gently. "Don't worry. I'm not here to sensationalize anything. Quite the opposite." She turned back to Lily. "You have a gift with animals, don't you, child?" Lily nodded cautiously. "I just understand them sometimes. Is that weird?" "Not weird at all," Savannah assured her. "Rare, yes, special certainly, but not weird." "Miss Reed," Jessica began carefully, "what exactly are you suggesting?" The elderly woman's eyes crinkled with a knowing smile. "I'm suggesting that your daughter has an ability that science hasn't quite figured out how to measure or explain. A sensitivity to animals that goes beyond normal observation or empathy." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "With all due respect, that sounds rather mystical." "Does it?" Savannah countered mildly. "Is it any more mystical than a mother bear recognizing that humans were trying to help her cub, or a wild animal responding to a child's voice when all other interventions failed?" "You think Lily has some kind of special connection with animals?" Jessica asked. "I know she does," Savannah replied with absolute certainty, "because I had it too when I was young." This revelation stunned the family into silence. "It faded as I grew older," Savannah continued, "but I never forgot what it felt like, that wordless understanding, that sense of knowing what an animal was feeling or needing." Lily leaned forward eagerly. "That's exactly what it's like. It's like they talk to me, but not with words." Savannah nodded. "And sometimes they listen to you in return." "Did you ever help animals like Aurora and Nova?" Lily asked. A shadow passed over Savannah's face. "Once. A wolf family whose den had been destroyed by logging. I tried to help them, but—" She sighed. "This was many years ago. People were less understanding about wildlife then. The wolves were shot before I could convince anyone to help relocate them." "That's awful," Lily whispered. "It was," Savannah agreed, "which is why I'm here now. Word has spread about your bears and about the man in the black SUV who visited yesterday." Jessica tensed. "Mr. Hayes?" Savannah nodded. "The community is talking. Some people think the bears should be studied. Others think they should be left alone. But everyone's curious about the little girl who sang to a mother bear and lived to tell about it." "We're trying to keep Lily out of the spotlight," Ethan explained. The last thing we want is for her to become some kind of local celebrity over this." "I understand," Savannah assured him. "But you should know that Hayes has been asking questions around town. About Lily, specifically." A chill ran through Jessica. "What kind of questions?" "Whether she's always had a way with animals. Whether anyone has observed other unusual abilities or behaviors from her." Savannah's expression was grave. "He's building a case for studying her along with the bears." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not happening." "I agree," Savannah said, "which is why I've been gently redirecting the conversation whenever I hear people discussing Lily's role in the bears' rescue, suggesting it was luck, not any special connection." "Thank you," Jessica said sincerely. Savannah reached into her bag and withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with animal figures. "This is for you, Lily. It belonged to my grandmother, who had the gift stronger than anyone in our family." Lily accepted the box reverently, running her fingers over the detailed carvings. "It's beautiful. What's inside?" "Open it and see," Savannah encouraged. Lily carefully lifted the lid to reveal a delicate silver pendant on a leather cord. The pendant was shaped like a bear paw print. "My grandmother called it a spirit token," Savannah explained. "She believed it helped her focus her connection with animals. Whether that's true or just superstition, I can't say. But I've kept it safe all these years, waiting for someone who might appreciate its meaning." "I love it," Lily breathed, lifting the necklace from the box. "Can I wear it?" "Of course," Savannah smiled. "It's yours now." As Jessica helped Lily fasten the necklace, Savannah leaned closer to Ethan. "Whatever you're planning for those bears," she said quietly, "know that many in the community will support you, even if they don't say so publicly. Hayes doesn't speak for all of us." Ethan started to protest that they weren't planning anything, then thought better of it. Savannah Reed had lived in these mountains longer than anyone. If she suspected something was afoot, denying it would only insult her intelligence. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means a lot." The next day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. The marshals went about their normal routines, Ethan catching up on work emails, Jessica preparing meals, Lily completing her weekend homework. But an electric undercurrent of excitement and apprehension ran beneath every mundane activity. As evening approached, they prepared for their return to the rehabilitation center. Lily wore Savannah's pendant beneath her sweater, touching it occasionally as if drawing strength from its presence. "Remember," Jessica reminded her as they drove through the darkening forest, "you have to follow Dr. Morgan and Ranger Bennett's instructions exactly, no matter what happens with the bears." "I will," Lily promised. "I just want to help them go home." The rehabilitation center was quiet when they arrived, most of the staff having departed for the day. Dr. Morgan met them at a side entrance, her typically immaculate appearance showing signs of stress. Hair slightly disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. "Everything's prepared," she informed them in hushed tones as she led them through dimly lit corridors. "Aurora and Nova have been sedated, very lightly, just enough to keep them calm during transport. The transport vehicle is waiting at the rear loading dock." "Any complications?" Ethan asked. Dr. Morgan shook her head. "Not yet, but Hayes called twice today, checking on the bear's status. He mentioned he'll be visiting first thing tomorrow morning with transport orders for Aurora." "Then we're just in time," Jessica observed. "Precisely." Dr. Morgan pushed open a door leading to the loading area. "Ranger Bennett and the team are waiting." The scene in the loading bay was one of controlled urgency. Bennett and 3 staff members were gathered around a large transport cage mounted on a specially designed truck. Medical equipment had been carefully arranged nearby, and multiple security monitors displayed various angles of the facility. "Everything's clear," Bennett reported as they approached. "Perimeter cameras show no activity. The sedatives are working well. Both bears are calm but conscious." Dr. Morgan quickly briefed the marshals on the plan. "We'll bring Aurora through first, then Nova. The transport cage is designed with a divider that will keep them separated, but able to see and smell each other during the journey. Once we reach the release site, we'll open both compartments simultaneously from a safe distance." "Where do you need me?" Lily asked, clutching the bear paw pendant through her sweater. Dr. Morgan indicated a position near the loading ramp. "Stand here. When Aurora comes through, speak to her calmly. Your voice should help keep her oriented despite the sedation." Lily nodded, taking her position with solemn determination. "Here we go," Bennett announced, activating the mechanism that would bring the bears from their enclosure to the loading bay. The minutes that followed were tense but precisely choreographed. Aurora appeared first, her massive form swaying slightly as she walked the short distance to the transport cage, guided by barriers on either side. When she hesitated, looking disoriented by the sedative, Lily began to speak. "It's okay, Aurora," she called softly. "You're going home, to the forest. You and Nova will be free." The bear's head turned toward Lily's voice, and remarkably she continued forward, entering the transport cage with unexpected docility. Nova followed minutes later, his smaller form moving with the awkward gait of a cub, still not fully recovered but determined to follow his mother. Again, Lily's gentle encouragement seemed to ease his anxiety, guiding him into the adjacent compartment of the transport cage. "Incredible," Dr. Morgan murmured as the transport doors were secured. "I've never seen sedated bears respond so cooperatively during transport procedures." With the bears safely secured, the next phase began. The marshals followed in their own vehicle as Bennett drove the transport truck along back roads, avoiding main highways and populated areas. Dr. Morgan rode with Bennett, monitoring the bears' vital signs throughout the journey. The drive to the release site took nearly 3 hours, winding ever deeper into the wilderness. They finally arrived at an unmarked Forest Service road that disappeared into dense woods. "This is as far as vehicles can go," Bennett explained as they gathered in the moonlight. "From here, we'll need to activate the remote release mechanism and retreat to a safe distance." The transport cage had been designed with state-of-the-art technology that would allow the doors to open automatically after the humans had withdrawn. Bennett carried a tablet that would trigger the mechanism and monitor the bears via cameras mounted on the truck. "The sedatives should be wearing off within the next 30 minutes, Dr. Morgan informed them. "Timing is crucial. We want them alert enough to move into the forest, but not so alert that they become agitated before release." Bennett led them to an observation blind about 100 yards from the truck, well concealed among the trees but with a clear view of the release point. The night was clear, with a bright moon illuminating the forest clearing where the transport vehicle waited. "This is really happening," Jessica whispered, taking her husband's hand. "They're going to be free." Ethan squeezed her fingers. "Thanks to a lot of good people, willing to bend the rules for the right reasons." As they settled into the blind, Dr. Morgan checked the monitoring equipment one last time. "Vital signs are strong. The sedatives are definitely wearing off. Aurora is becoming more alert." "Can I watch through the camera too?" Lily asked eagerly. Bennett angled the tablet so she could see. On the screen, Aurora was indeed moving more purposefully, testing the barriers of her enclosure with growing awareness. In the adjacent compartment, Nova was also stirring, responding to his mother's increased activity. "I think it's time, Doctor," Morgan said quietly. Their body temperatures and heart rates indicate they're approaching normal wakefulness. Bennett nodded and prepared the release sequence. Once I activate this, there's a 60-second delay before the doors open. That gives us time to ensure absolute silence. No movement, no talking. We don't want their first experience of freedom to include human presence. Everyone nodded their understanding. With a final glance around the group, Bennett pressed the activation command. "Release sequence initiated," he confirmed. "Doors will open in 60 seconds. Those 60 seconds seemed to stretch into eternity as they waited in breathless anticipation. The forest around them was alive with night sounds, the rustle of leaves, the call of owls, the distant howl of what might have been a coyote. 10 seconds, Bennett whispered. Lily clutched her bear paw pendant, her eyes fixed on the transport vehicle visible in the moonlight. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With a soft mechanical click that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet forest, the transport doors swung open. For several long moments, nothing happened. The bears, confused by their sudden freedom after days of enclosure, hesitated at the threshold. Aurora emerged first, her massive form cautious yet purposeful as she tested the air with her sensitive nose. She paused at the edge of the transport platform, surveying the moonlit forest before her. A wild place without barriers or human interference. Nova followed more hesitantly, pressing close to his mother's side. The cub's movements were stronger than they had been at the rehabilitation center, his injured leg bearing weight more confidently. Together, mother and cub descended from the platform, their paws touching natural forest floor for the first time since their rescue. Aurora led Nova in a cautious circle around the transport vehicle, her nose constantly testing the air, ears swiveling to capture every sound. Then, in a moment none of the humans would ever forget, Aurora paused and turned toward the observation blind. Although there was no possible way she could see them through the camouflaged structure, she seemed to look directly at their position. She rose briefly onto her hind legs, a magnificent silhouette against the moonlit clearing, before dropping back to all fours. Nova mimicked his mother's stance for a moment, a smaller shadow rising beside her, then returning to the ground. Without further hesitation, Aurora led her cub toward the dense forest. At the tree line, she paused once more, looking back toward where the humans hid. Then, with purposeful strides, she disappeared into the wilderness, Nova close behind her. They were gone, swallowed by the forest that was their birthright, free to live as nature intended. In the observation blind, no one spoke for several minutes, each person processing the profound significance of what they had witnessed. Lily's face shone with tears of joy in the dim light, her small hand still clutching the bear paw pendant. "They're home," she whispered finally. "They're really home." Dr. Morgan checked the tracking data on her tablet. Both bears had been fitted with non-invasive tracking collars designed to fall off naturally after approximately 1 year. "They're moving steadily northwest," she reported, "exactly toward the area we identified as optimal habitat." "Almost as if they knew where to go," Bennett remarked with a touch of wonder. The journey back to civilization was subdued, each person lost in their own thoughts about the night's events. By the time they returned to the marshal's cabin, dawn was breaking over the mountains, bathing the forest in golden light. "What happens now?" Lily asked as they stood on the porch watching the sunrise. "Will Mr. Hayes be angry when he finds out the bears are gone?" Bennett, who had accompanied them home, smiled wryly. "Oh, he'll be furious. But by the time anyone realizes what happened, Aurora and Nova will be deep in protected wilderness. The official story will be that they escaped during a routine enclosure transfer, an unfortunate accident that occurred despite our best precautions." "Will you get in trouble?" Jessica asked, concerned. Dr. Morgan, who had also joined them, shrugged. Possibly, but we've been careful to create enough plausible deniability, and frankly, after 30 years of service, I'm not overly concerned about bureaucratic repercussions. The important thing, Bennett added, is that Aurora and Nova have their chance at a wild life. We'll monitor them remotely through the tracking collars, but otherwise they'll be left to live naturally. As the rehabilitation team prepared to leave, Dr. Morgan knelt to address Lily directly. You did something remarkable, young lady. Something that challenged everything I thought I knew about wildlife rehabilitation. Lily ducked her head, suddenly shy. I just wanted to help them. And you did, Doctor, Morgan assured her. More than you know. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, official-looking card. This is for you. It's a Junior Wildlife Conservationist certificate. Normally, we give these to children who complete our education program, but I think you've more than earned it. Lily accepted the card with a beaming smile. Thank you. Does this mean I can help with other animals too? Dr. Morgan laughed, a warm, genuine sound rarely heard from the typically serious veterinarian. We'll see. Perhaps a supervised visit to the center sometime might be arranged. She looked up at Jessica and Ethan. With your parents' permission, of course. As Bennett and Dr. Morgan departed, the Marshall family stood together on the porch, watching as the morning mist rose from the valley below. The events of the past few days seemed almost dreamlike in the clear light of morning. The desperate bear cub, the mother's trust, the midnight release into the wild. Do you think we'll ever see them again? Lily asked, leaning against her father's side. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. Probably not, sweetheart. And that's as it should be. Wild animals belong in the wild, not in our world. But we'll know they're out there, Jessica added, living the life they were meant to live. Lily nodded, her hand finding the bear paw pendant beneath her sweater. I think Aurora will remember us, though. Not like people remember, but in her own way. I think so, too, Jessica agreed, surprising herself with how naturally she accepted this notion that would have seemed absurd just days ago. In the months that followed, life gradually returned to normal for the Marshall family. Hayes did indeed appear at their door the day after the release, his professional demeanor barely concealing his fury as he questioned them about the bear's escape. But with no evidence of their involvement beyond being present for a standard observation visit, there was little he could do. The tracking data showed Aurora and Nova thriving in their new territory. They had established a den in a remote area rich with food sources, and Nova's growth and development proceeded normally, his injured leg healing completely, as Dr. Morgan had predicted. Lily continued to visit the rehabilitation center occasionally, her natural gift with animals becoming a valuable asset in calming injured wildlife. Dr. Morgan, true to her word, had created a special junior volunteer position that allowed Lily to assist under careful supervision. The story of the bear's rescue and release became something of a local legend, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Some versions claimed Aurora had bowed to the Marshalls before disappearing into the forest. Others suggested Lily could speak directly to animals in their own language. The Marshalls neither confirmed nor denied these embellishments, preferring to let the story take on a life of its own. Savannah Reed became a frequent visitor to their cabin, sharing her own wildlife experiences with Lily and teaching her about the responsibility that came with her special connection to animals. The gift isn't just about understanding them, she explained during one of their conversations. It's about being their voice when they cannot speak for themselves, about reminding humans that we share this world with creatures whose lives matter just as much as our own. A year later, after the first heavy snowfall of winter, The marshals woke to unusual tracks in the snow outside their cabin. Larger than a dog's, but smaller than an adult bear's, the prints led to their porch and then circled the cabin before disappearing back into the forest. Ranger Bennett, summoned by a curious phone call from Ethan, examined the tracks with professional interest. These were made by a juvenile bear, he confirmed, probably a yearling based on the size. Nova? Lily asked hopefully, having joined them on the porch wrapped in a heavy coat. Bennett shook his head. Impossible to say for certain. The tracking collars both detached months ago as designed. The last data showed Aurora and Nova over 50 miles from here. But it could be him, Lily pressed. Bennett smiled at her enthusiasm. Bears don't typically return to specific locations unless there's a reliable food source, and they certainly don't visit human dwellings deliberately. Unless they remember something important that happened there, Lily suggested. Bennett chuckled. Well, I can't argue with the bear whisperer, can I? He grew more serious. If it was Nova, he shouldn't be encouraged to visit human habitations. That could be dangerous for him as he grows. I know, Lily agreed. Wild animals need to stay wild. After Bennett left, Lily stood on the porch for a long time, looking out at the forest where the mysterious tracks disappeared. She closed her eyes and reached out with that special sense she was learning to trust and develop, that wordless understanding that connected her to the animal world. Far in the distance, beyond the range of human hearing, a young bear paused in his exploration of the winter forest. He lifted his head, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. For a moment, he turned toward the distant human dwelling where he had once been rescued on a cold night. Then, with the sure-footed confidence of a wild creature in its element, he continued on his way, free and unbound. Back at the cabin, Lily opened her eyes and smiled. "Goodbye, Nova," she whispered. "Be happy." As she turned to go inside, a soft breeze stirred the trees, carrying the essence of the wild forest. A reminder that some connections transcend the boundaries between humans and animals, between civilization and wilderness. The lesson of Aurora and Nova would stay with the Marshall family forever. That compassion could bridge seemingly impossible divides. That courage often meant standing up for those who couldn't speak for themselves, and that sometimes letting go was the greatest act of love possible. The bears were where they belonged, and that was enough.